welcome, and in this video I'm going to share my experiences with this camera, the Canon R7 and the Canon RF 600mm f11 lens. Now this is not meant to be an in-depth review of how to set up the Canon R7, but I'm going to show you what I think from using it in the field in terms of the image quality I can get out of it and also the practicality. Now what I'm going to do is show you me actually using this out in the field here in the UK, sharing my thoughts, and also a little bit abroad in Serbia as well. And then at the end of the video I'm going to look at everything I've learnt, see what I think, and give you my conclusions on how good a combination this is. Before I do that, I'm just going to give you a rundown on what this gear is. The camera, the Canon R7, is a mirrorless camera. It's got an APS-C sensor. That means it's a crop sensor 1.6, so it's not full frame, and it has the RF mount to take RF lenses. And this is the RF 600mm f11 lens. It's a fixed focal length of 600mm and a fixed aperture of f11, so you can't change the aperture at all. It always stays at f11. Absolutely incredible weather today. We had a bit of snow yesterday and then really cold overnight, so there's like a thick frost on top of that as well. So conditions are fantastic. The light is just going to be phenomenal. So first of all, I'm just going to start off trying to get some fairly simple static portraits. I've currently got it on electronic shutter. I've got the single focus point, so I've just got one focus point at the moment. I've got the subject tracking on. You can have that on or switch it off, and I've also got the eye detection enabled as well. So just focusing on that female mallard there. It seemed to pick up the eye okay. I don't really think it dropped off. Have another look. It's struggling now. So now the bird's turned its head more, it's struggling, and it's back on. When it was side on, the focus was staying on there, it was tracking. So what I'm doing now is trying a mute swan. It's an adult, so obviously it's completely white. I'm going for a vertical shot, and it's very, very close, and I'm focusing on the eye, and it's just not doing it. So it did do it briefly, and then it's come off. So on that eye, on the swan, it's just not looking on at all. It's kind of, the box is going wider, doesn't like it. And to be fair, pretty similar with the immature swan as well, the younger ones, which are obviously more brown on them. It was just being a little bit better there on the eye, but again, just felt like it was being inconsistent, just dropping off and the box going wider, I guess trying to find an eye. Bear in mind that everything I'm shooting at the moment is in bright sunlight, and we've got some nice reflection as well from the frost, the snow, so that always helps. And the light is pretty quality, so kind of shooting in optimal conditions at the moment really. One of the things I really wanted to try was different shutter, because I've heard a few things about mechanical shutter on this. So I've just brought the shutter speed down to 1/250th of a second, because I reckon I can probably still keep it stable. Back on this mallard, so that was with electronic shutter. I took a few shots and then I've gone on to mechanical shutter. The mechanical shutter is just really, really noisy, and like when you're shooting with it, for me, you know, when I'm shooting with that mechanical shutter, it feels like there's a lot of vibration. You know, it sounds noisy, it just feels like there's probably going to be more vibration. So I'll check those images. I'll put those images up on the screen now so you can see if there is a difference between electronic and mechanical. Now, one of the things that you need to know about this lens, and I didn't know when it was giving me like an error message, and I had to look it up, that it probably won't come like this. So if I just put it back, when you get it, it's probably going to look like this. This is not its shooting position. Okay, so what you need to do, it'll be like that, it'll be locked. You need to twist this to unlock it, and then extend the lens and then lock it back. So this is its full shooting position. If you don't get that, if you don't do that, then you'll get some message on the screen and you have to figure it out. But yeah, that's its shooting position now. One of the things that you kind of forget, or I have done, is that it's f11. So like instantly off the bat, you've got less light. If you're used to a lens at say f5.6 for example, you've got 2 whole stops less when you're shooting with this. So instantly you're having to use either a slower shutter speed or a higher ISO or a combination of those. I've currently got the camera on manual exposure and auto ISO, but of course the aperture is fixed at f11, so you can't change that. And being on auto ISO, so literally the only thing I'm changing at the moment is the shutter speed. I'm going to try tracking some of these ducks, so a bit more movement. Let's see if I can track some of the ducks swimming in. I just tried to do some birds in flight. I just tried some gulls, and it was just so hard because this 600mm and then there's 1.6 crop. Like, it just felt like they were massive in the frame, and I was just struggling. It was so difficult, and they weren't that far away. So if they're further away, it'd be a bit easier, but they were just massive in the frame. So I'd definitely say that's something you might struggle with if you try birds in flight with this. You know, it can be a challenge. And something else I didn't know was shooting manual in auto ISO, I wanted to be able to do some exposure compensation, which I've just had to do a little bit with the Gulls. Now when I tried to do this with a wheel on the back, nothing happened. So if you're in aperture priority, then you've got a wheel on the back, quite small. I don't like how small it is for me. I'd like a much bigger, chunkier one. But yeah, so if you go into manual, then that wheel doesn't do anything. I had to look this one up as well. So if you want to do exposure compensation, then I don't know if there's another way of doing it. This is the only way I know so far. Is in actual fact what you do is if you half press the shutter and then just move that little ring, that ring that's on the lens itself, then that will do your exposure compensation. So if you want to use manual with auto ISO, then that's how you can change your exposure with the compensation. This is now a much more shaded area. I've got a lot less light here to work with, and having a look at this already, I've got 500th of a second on auto ISO, and it's giving me like 6,400 at the moment. There's a lot less light here, but also again with that f11, it's just kind of pushing everything all the time. What I do like about this is kind of the handling, sort of the weight distribution. So with this combination, it just feels really nice to hand hold. It feels like the weight is nicely balanced, which it sometimes isn't. And I found if I hold it around here, that just feels really nice to me. Feels like I can, you know, I can keep myself really stable. I've got my elbow in here. Feels really good. Now, because my ISO is getting pretty high, I don't really like to do that, and I'm not sure on this camera how good it's going to be. So I've tried to bring the shutter speed down, just so I can bring the ISO down. I'm on auto ISO. And I went down to about 200th, tried some shots, and I thought, let's push it more. I tried some on 100th, and then it actually went down to about 1/80th or 1/60th of a second, which sounds crazy. I would never advise that for small birds, and obviously they don't stay still for too long. But some of the great tits, they just stay still long enough for me to have a proper go at that without too much subject movement. But the main thing about that is just the stability was just absolutely incredible. Like, I'm quite amazed at that, this combination. It does have the image stabilization, the IBIS, the camera and the lens, I'm pretty sure will work together, and you can hear it working when you start shooting. But to hand hold a 600mm, yes, it is very light, but it's a big magnification. To hand hold a 600mm, and some of those shots I did at 1/60th of a second, just staying as still as I could with electronic shutter, that's going to help. On the back of the camera, they actually look pretty sharp. Now, my feeling is on this camera, if you tried that with mechanical shutter, you just wouldn't get away with it, because I think there's too much vibration. That trying to change the exposure compensation is really tough for me. You're having to half press the shutter and then move this ring. Sometimes I can't feel the ring, it's not very big. That's partly because I'm wearing gloves maybe, but I'm just finding it really difficult, and it's taking a lot of time. Again, even here it's crazy. I'm having to back off, even with the small birds here, because they come really close. I'm even having to back off again with the great tits and blue tits. There's one right there. A couple of times it's kind of been flashing. I think it went red, which is suggesting that it's too close, it can't focus because it's below its minimum focus distance. And the minimum focus distance of this lens isn't very good. That's one of the things. It's 4.5 meters, I think it is. So you know, for very small birds, you're going to struggle to fill the frame. One of the trips I did was to Donna Nook in Lincolnshire to photograph the grey seals, really big grey seal colony there, and I managed to get a few shots here with the Canon R7 and the RF 600mm lens. Now, I'd say my experiences here were pretty similar to photographing with the birds. I did find at times that the focus, particularly the eye focus, was inconsistent. Although with the seals, I think it's fair to say that the eye sometimes can be a little bit more difficult for the camera to pick up. And I also took this combination with me to Serbia to photograph the long-eared owls. And just a little plug here, I do this trip every year. If you're interested in coming along with me, just send me an email. Email's in the description below. Now, the light levels were really, really poor almost for the entire time that we were actually there, so that made things very challenging. I'll share with you some of the pictures that I took with the R7 and the 600mm at the end of this video. I've come now to a fantastic place for flight photography. This is fantastic for red kites. Sometimes get buzzards as well, but lots of red kites here. I have made a little bit of a change with the focusing. So I've still got the tracking, still got subject tracking on and eye detection enabled at the moment. I'm just changing it from single point, and I've gone to expand AF area around, so it's kind of like a middle one, and then is it eight kind of little focus points around, so it kind of aids it. And again, I'm really noticing that f11 on this lens, so I'm trying to get the shutter speed pretty fast, about 2,000th of a second for these flight shots. And to do that, I'm having to get the ISO to 1600, which, you know, is reasonably fast. So even in this bright sunlight, I'm still having to put the ISO up. So I've got to say that this is absolutely fantastic for hand holding. You know, it's just so light, so easy to hand hold and to track the birds in flight. Now, in terms of the focus, it seems to be working okay there. I've got that expanded, more expanded focus points, a bigger area, and the box seemed to be tracking really well. Just seemed to be tracking, staying on the bird, you know, almost all the time, I think. And I've put the lens onto a strap now, so I've got it on my black Rapid strap. So actually put it, there's kind of a screw fit there, so you can do that. It's really good for carrying around if you want to just give yourself a bit of a break. So this lens doesn't have like a lens collar, which would probably be better, but it does have a screw fit, so you can attach it to something. Still staying with electronic shutter at the moment. I'm going to look out for rolling shutter. One of the things I did find there was with the image stabilization when I was tracking, which just felt a bit weird for me. I'm never a massive fan of image stabilization anyway, to be honest, but earlier on for the static shots, when I was just keeping it steady, it was kind of like it was settling itself and it was just rock solid. I felt it was absolutely fantastic. For this, when I'm tracking the birds, it just feels like it's kind of moving a little bit jerkily, which I don't like, so it could just be me. I really do hope that that was useful, watching me out in the field with that equipment. I think it's so much better when you can watch people actually out there shooting kind of in real time with that gear. Now, if you're still watching this video, thanks for sticking with me. It's now January 2024, so Happy New Year. Started making this video in November, so you've been watching it for quite a long time. Now, I think I should mention that I am actually coming at this from a Canon R6 and then previously a 1DX before that. I think it's good to know that because it gives you more of an idea of my experiences and kind of my expectations maybe when I'm trying out new gear. Now, first of all, I'm just going to share my thoughts a little bit more on the lens, the RF 600mm f11, and I've got to say, overall, I was really impressed with this lens. The image quality is very good. I was perhaps a little surprised how good it was. I maybe didn't think it would be as good as that. The weight, I mean, the size and the weight and the hand holdability, you just can't really beat it, in all honesty, for, you know, just for how light it is. It was really a dream to use that, to hand hold that and photograph. It was just so easy, so comfortable. So it's fixed f11, which is something I'm not used to at all. It's very, very alien to me, that. Now, in terms of your depth of field, of course, it is going to affect that. It's going to be harder to get those really out of focus blurry backgrounds. Now, in all honesty, when I was photographing the owls in Serbia, for example, I didn't notice too much, and that's probably because there's already quite a lot around the subject with often a lot of branches and leaves, so maybe it wasn't as noticeable. I did notice the effect of the f11 more when I was photographing the small birds and also the seals, so, you know, I couldn't get that really nice blurry out of focus that you'd get with, say, a f5.6 or a really expensive f4 lens. The image quality overall, like with the Canon R7 and the 600mm lens, I actually thought was very, very good. Again, I was probably fairly impressed with that. So I think a lot of people would be very happy. I think it would be good enough image quality for a lot of people. You'd be able to get a lot of decent images out of it. I definitely saw, you know, a considerable loss of quality when the ISOs were higher, although a lot of that I think was just down to the noise levels that you've got at those higher ISOs. Now, I did try and push it a little bit to test that in Serbia. Really, really poor light, so I was having to push the ISO anyway. I've put some images up on the screen here so you can see. This one, 5000 ISO, so we are pushing the ISO a fair bit there, I'd say, for this camera. You can see the quality there. This is the raw file, just zoomed in on the raw file, so it gives you a better idea of the true quality. And then this one at ISO 10,000, and you know, it's just really starting to look really, really bad. It really looks very noisy, very poor quality looking to me. The focusing on this combination, I'd have to say it just seemed quite inconsistent, is the best way for me to describe it, really. There was times where it worked absolutely fine, no problems. Locked on where it should, nice and sharp, and then there was times where it just didn't seem to cope for some reason, and I felt there was certainly situations where the camera and the lens should have coped, it should have got that focus, but it just didn't. So I did end up with a fair number of images of missed focus through my testing, and the thing with that is that it just makes you less confident. So personally, I just felt I wasn't that confident shooting with it that it would nail the focus when I expected it to. And also with the f11, it did mean that I was always having to use either a higher ISO or a slower shutter speed in order to get sharp images and decent quality images. So that is going to be a challenge. It's the focal length 600mm fixed, which is pretty big. And then also I had the crop, the 1.6 crop factor of the camera body as well. When I tried the Gulls, they were quite close by, and that was really really tough. If you look back at the images, but the mixture of images I took of the Gulls, I got very few from that session that were actually pin sharp, that were good enough for me, and quite a lot of out of focus ones. Now in terms of the red kites, that was much easier, because the red kites, the further away and the slower flying birds as well, I felt at the time like the lens was performing pretty well. However, when I actually looked at the images after, a lot of them weren't as sharp as I thought they were, or I expected them to be. So I did get a number of images that just looked, they just had like again, just had a little bit of lack of sharpness, and that can be for different reasons, but some of them, you know, where I think they should have been pin sharp to me, they just didn't look it. So whether the camera, the focusing on the camera and the lens together, I'm not too sure, whether that just wasn't working consistently at the time. Okay, so what about the camera, the Canon R7? What did I think of that? Well, first of all, I'm just going to mention the build quality. I don't think I mentioned that in the video really, and I have to say, like, I'm really not impressed with that at all. Sorry Canon, but the build quality just seems really poor to me on this camera. It does feel almost a bit plasticky. The wheel on the back just feels really flimsy. It doesn't feel very solid at all, and it does make me think a bit about durability as well. Just that lack of build quality to me, you know, how would that hold up in difficult conditions? Now the mechanical shutter, this was something I really wanted to try out, and I did. I have to say, the mechanical shutter to me just sounds really noisy, and I felt like there was lots of vibration. It just felt pretty bad to me, and I really wouldn't want to shoot it with mechanical shutter. Now you might need to sometimes to get around rolling shutter, but I would, you know, much prefer to photograph with electronic shutter on this camera. Now apologies, I never got to test the R7 with my EF 500mm f4, which I think some people had asked me to do. I just didn't get around to doing that, unfortunately. I did take a few shots of the seals with the R7 and EF 300mm, my old EF 300mm f4 lens, and that worked pretty well. I'd say similar experience to using the RF 600 really. The way it focused I think was pretty similar. The image quality looks similar. If anything, with the EF lens I felt maybe it was just slightly crisper. And also I used my Canon R6 with the 600mm lens as well, which is something I really wanted to do to test it. And I have to say, I was really impressed with that combination. So the R6 with the 600, which I used for the owls again in Serbia, I was really impressed with the image quality. Using ISOs maybe around 2000 to 3200, and they did look considerably better to me than with the R7. The images just looked cleaner overall, and they performed better at higher noise. I should get an office really, shouldn't I? I should be like one of these posh YouTubers with the office with a nice purple and blue lights. So overall I'd say the reach of this combination is fantastic. Having the 600mm and the crop factor is really going to help you with the reach. So this is good if you're often photographing things that are further away. Perhaps if you're someone who does a lot of walking, you take the camera with you, then this might be the camera for you. The F11 can reduce your image quality at times, so it's generally a much easier combination to use, I would say, in bright light, and much more difficult to use in low light. I do think for a lot of people out there the image quality is going to be certainly satisfactory, perhaps more if you're a beginner. You know, you're going to be happy with the image quality. Overall it is good, but I think if you're a bit more experienced and perhaps you're a bit more of a pixel peeper maybe, you're trying to get the most quality you can, then I think you might be a little bit disappointed. Of course, everyone's idea of image quality is different. I tend to be a little bit more bothered about noise than a lot of people perhaps, and obviously you can use noise reduction software if that's something that you want to reduce in your images. And I definitely think the RF 600mm lens is worth considering to pair up perhaps with a better camera body, particularly useful if you're photographing subjects that are further away. Now please let me know in the comments if you have experience of using this particular combination. It's useful for me, but also to other viewers. If you can share information with other people watching this channel, watching this video, that's really going to help them. So any information you've got about this combination, your experiences for any type of wildlife photography, please do put them in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching. Again, wish you a happy new year, and I'll see you in the next video.